One of the film's producers, Joe Knopp, joins us on the line to talk about it now. Hi, Joe. Welcome to the Canby Now Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. We're excited to talk to you for a few minutes. So I think it's probably fair to say that the response to your movie has been polarizing. Most films, you hear people say like, oh, it's good, I liked it, or it's bad, I didn't like it, whatever. But with Unplanned, people are invested. You have people lobbying for it, like, oh, you absolutely have to go see it. Or some people are like, stay away from it. Did you guys expect that kind of response as the folks that made the movie?
That's a great question. I mean, obviously, we're aware of the sensitivity of the abortion issue in this country. What we didn't know when we started out, several years ago, the heightened level of awareness that this country would be facing, since the beginning of this year, just a few months ago, with all the headlines of these states trying to pass really the most progressive abortion laws that we've ever seen. That I think it really charged and primed people to start thinking about their belief on the issue, especially with the images they were being forced to think about from some of these states like New York and Virginia. So I think that set the stage for when the movie came out, which allowed people kind of on the inside to see what a typical Planned Parenthood clinic looks like, and then also to be taken into the procedure room to actually see an abortion. And to be truth be told, the hope was that it would get enough awareness for people to be talking about it, because it's an issue that our country is facing, and I think for a lot of people, they choose their belief based on maybe the party that they belong to, or maybe like parental beliefs. And our desire is for people to understand on their own, what abortion truly is, and they need to decide if it's right or wrong.
Well, you're the producer of this movie. You've produced a couple of other films as well, I Can Only Imagine and Woodlawn. One common thing that, and I've seen it myself with Christian films, a common criticism that comes up is they're a little too kind of black and white, they kind of simplify things a little too much, or sort of seem a little bit like an after-school special in that way. But I like your work, those films that I've mentioned that I have seen, and I feel like you try to approach that a little more in a little more of a balanced way. And I haven't seen Unplanned, but from things that I have read, other folks have mentioned that comes through a little bit, that it doesn't feel like it's completely deaf to quote unquote the other side, or you guys attempted to make a more balanced approach in this film. Is that true? And how did you kind of go about that?
Yeah, I appreciate you recognizing that and commenting on that. I think the same thread with all three of those movies are they are all true stories. And we try to hover as close as we can to the facts in those true stories. And as you and I and the audience understands, true stories are messy. All of our lives have ups and downs. We have success, we have failures.
They're complicated.
They're complicated.
Yeah.
So when you're telling someone's story, a true story, that's just part of the story. So what we like to do is just tell someone's story without leaving anything out. And that's a common thread that you'll see in all these movies.
Sure. Well, I've also mentioned that, obviously some folks have been big fans of the movie that you guys made. A number of people in Canby, friends of mine on Facebook and whatnot, have been, actually all the folks I know that have seen it have been very much in support of it. Has that been encouraging to you guys? Have you been hearing from folks that have really, as far as the box office and things, you guys have been, had some, at least from the outside, some surprising success. I don't know if maybe you guys expected that, but
we're always appreciative when the audience shows up. It's just never a given, but you are right in that the feedback that we've gotten, I think first, from a movie standpoint, people do appreciate that it feels like and looks like a real movie. I think sometimes that's not always the case in our space, so that's a compliment. But then when they start talking about just the impact of what this story has done for them in their life, whether they've kind of clicked the box of pro-life, but didn't really know what that meant. We have a lot of people leaving the theater that are just motivated to engage to help the cause of life and to move it forward. And then we have people who've been affected by abortion, either in their own life or in their own family. And there's never a good time to talk about that. So the other common thread that we've heard is people who have experienced abortion in their own world, for the first time, they're talking about it. And this is hopefully beginning a healing process for them, just like it did for Abby and her journey.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So that was a big goal of yours, to kind of spark that dialogue, provide a space and an opportunity for people to have those kind of conversations that don't, normally just come up in conversation like, oh, I've had an experience with abortion or what have you.
Yeah, I think often in life, when we go through tough times, we often think we're the only ones to experience that, and that we're alone. And a lot of times we kind of bury it and we don't necessarily deal with it. And sometimes we think, God's not even big enough to handle it. So with Abby's story, who just in a very vulnerable state, shares everything that she's been through, and she's been through it all. So when people see her being willing to tell the extreme story that she has lived, it really has allowed people to kind of let their guard down and to begin to share their own journey.
Cool. Well, the last thing I wanted to ask you about, and it's the reason that I haven't seen Unplanned yet, it doesn't have anything to do with the message or anything like that. I've just, the film was given an R rating, not for any language or nudity or adult content of that sort, but there are from my understanding, a couple of scenes that show kind of unflinching look at an actual abortion. And my wife is pregnant right now. I don't know if I can handle watching that. Can you talk about that decision that you made? You've kind of mentioned it a little bit, but the decision to show that in such an unflinching way, and how that was received as far as getting the R rating, and maybe how audiences have received it.
Yeah, so great point, and that has become kind of a controversial issue surrounding the movie, that the fact that we got an R rating. So the few scenes that you're talking about, as storytellers and filmmakers, you have to have that balance of how do we expose what is really happening in these clinics, and for the audience to emotionally engage and feel what Abby truly felt before she made her transformation and what led to her transformation. So a great analogy to use is a movie called The Passion of Christ, where Mel Gibson, really for the first time, exposed the audience to the extreme suffering that Christ actually went through, in order to appreciate him rising from the dead and be dying on the cross for us. So with Unplanned, it was the same thing. How do we take the audience, right to the edge? And whenever you take an audience to the edge, what you understand is a few will fall off. So you try to have that sensitivity to how do you take the audience to the edge without entirely losing your audience. So the few scenes that you're talking about definitely show the audience what Abby experienced. And that's what gave it the R rating. Now, the really interesting fact about the R rating is, obviously there's movies with far more grotesque violence that still get PG-13, but the MPAA, the organization in Hollywood, it's a panel of 10. They sit down, they watch the movie, and they discuss it afterwards. And then they decide what the rating is. So when they gave it an R rating, they were so emotionally engaged in the movie that they understood the violence they saw on the screen was a child being murdered. And because it was violence against humanity, they gave it an R rating. So normally when you think of Hollywood, you think of a very, liberal place. But they understood, they got it. They knew that what they were watching on the screen was violence against a little child. So for us, when you watch those scenes, and that is a child losing their life in front of your eyes, I can't think of a worse thing to have to visualize. So that's why we got the R rating. We realized when we got it that will prevent some people from seeing it, but we just felt like that was a part that we could not compromise.
It sounds like your understanding of that decision that was made, like it made sense to you why they chose to do that.
Yes, and in fact, there's part of me that, not that I am proud and not that my kids totally understand why I made an R-rated movie, but but the fact that, folks in Hollywood saw that violence of an abortion procedure was against a human, there's a little bit of a win there, I believe.
Cool. Well, now that, if you're going to compare it to Passion of the Christ, I'm even more scared because I saw that movie, man, and I was just a bawling wreck through like 95% of it. But we'll see if I can bring myself to watch it. But we're out of time here. Joe, did you have anything else that you wanted to add?
Well, I just want to appreciate your audience because I know a lot of them have supported the movie, supported the story of Abby Johnson. So thank you. That is how we get to tell these stories, by your audience showing up. And thanks for your time. I really appreciate it.
Well, absolutely. Thank you for your time, Joe. Joe Knopp is the producer of the new film Unplanned. You can see it in theaters now. He also has produced the films I Can Only Imagine and Woodlawn. You can learn more about him and his work on his website, joeknopp.com. That's Knopp. Thanks, Joe. Best of luck with your new film and all your future endeavors.
All right. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.